Hey, what's up, people? This is Teemu, Arina from Biohacker's Handbook and Biohacker Summit. Welcome to the show. Today, we're diving deep into breathing techniques. And of course, one of the biggest biohacks and techniques that people are interested in the biohacker community is everything about heat alteration, ice baths, all that, as well as different breathing techniques that you can use. Wim Hof Method is, of course, the most well-known. Or kind of the most popularized recently, but there's so many other things when it comes to breathing and proper breathing technique and different technologies and equipment you can use, including, for example, something to open up your nasal pathway so that your brain gets like 30% more oxygen in. And there's so many other techniques and tools you can use. And lungs are just like a muscle that you can exercise, you can expand your capacity of utilizing oxygen, your oxygen intake capacity. Like there's so many things you can do to be more resilient. And I think that resilience also builds immunity and it makes you harder to kill. So that's kind of the topic also of our next book called the Biohacker's Handbook sequel called The Resilient Being. And resilience is one of those things that we want to develop in these times. And yeah, today my guest is Leigh Ewin, and Leigh Ewin, he lives in Finland, but he's originally from Australia. And one interesting thing about this guy is that he kind of, he hated cold, and he definitely wasn't the expert on breathing techniques when he moved to Finland. He was probably like breathing too fast and was stressed in his work. But then he got himself kind of really deeply interested in it, and he's like one of the leading practitioners now in this region on these techniques, and he's really gone around the world to study some of the, all the different schools when it comes to breathing. And he's also one of our instructors at the Biohackers Retreat. So if you go to Biohackers Retreats, so it's S in the end, biohackersretreats.com, we have our next retreat, 28 to 30 of April here in Tallinn, Estonia, where Leigh Ewin is guiding everyone through like some really deep breathing techniques that are, the effect is close to psychedelics for sure, but it really helps us to kind of elevate our game. Yeah, there we have the website, so biohackersretreats.com. Go over there. We have limited seats. Also, Siim Land is teaching there. He's really one of the biggest names when it comes to how to become stronger by stress, different exercise protocols, nutrition, autophagy. Like he's definitely a big guy on that, as well as different diets like 1 meal a day or the ketogenic diet and all that. I will be there teaching a lot about different technologies and tools to use. And this retreat is not just only about presentations and teaching. It's a lot like hands-on experiences and learning. So you basically get to try all the supplements, all the technologies, hands-on, all the different techniques. We're going to have some really nice sauna sessions. Yeah, there's some cool videos on the website of our previous event here, so check it out. And it all culminates in a really amazing fire ceremony and some drumming and cacao ceremony. It's really good stuff. We got so good feedback. So if you're looking for a little vacation, little retreat, you want to meet the others, you want to meet us, come over to Biohacker's Retreat. And also Leigh Ewin will be speaking at Biohacker Summit. Biohacker Summit, which topic this year is reversing aging and extending health span. It takes place in Helsinki, Finland on 3 and 4 of June. Actually, it's the whole week. Like there's so many side events, including amazing after party. But that's the place to be, man. Like if you are really looking for, finding the others, finding the right type of content, but also like the right community, the right people, the right peers, in a full-blown experience. One of the privileges of like living here in the northern countries is like the limited restrictions we have, or if any, to my knowledge, most of the restrictions will be gone. If you don't have COVID passport, no problem, you can come. We don't have like hardcore measures in place, like you will be able to come over. We have some really top speakers, great exhibition. All of the exhibitors give hands-on opportunity to try many things out. And we have upgraded arts, upgraded food, all the nutrition, everything is next level. And the side events, including the Optimized Day workshop, Leigh will be also teaching there for sure. Some And we have some amazing sound healing sessions also in our retreats, together with Jani Toivonen and his great gong work. And all the nature experiences. We have in Finland, we have the cleanest air, cleanest water. I guess coolest people also. It's cool, but it's really nice. So, I mean, maybe you can, Leigh, attest to, like, you're kind of an outsider who moved to Finland, like probably have your reasons why to be here. But like, how do you see it? Like, did I over exaggerate anything, or is it all to the point?
You might have even missed a few things, Teemu. You missed the 187,000 lakes. You missed the how many more saunas do we have, more than people, or whatever it is? So maybe the same amount of saunas as people.
Yeah, if you want to learn from the source, like how to do a sauna properly, like you won't learn that from Joe Rogan or something. You know, those guys are like newcomers to the scene. You have to come to Finland. You have to learn straight from the source. And we have some of the sauna, I guess, shamans, people who are like professional sauna people. They will be there, older generation guys showing how to do it.
That's how we do biohacking here, right? I mean, it's all about the inclusion of nature. It's not about doing it for I've heard you say it before, Teemu, that sort of other parts of the world, maybe the US we're talking about. It's all about creating, like, being more optimal so you have more time to do more work. We kind of have a bit better balance out here. I think that's a big reason why I'm here, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. If Eetu can bring up strongerbystress.com, that's the documentary website. So we have been working on a documentary, and that documentary is a biohacking documentary. It's also a documentary about stress and breathing and many of these techniques. And this documentary is now actually in pre-order on iTunes, first starting on US and Canada side, but also it's coming out on other platforms, potentially Netflix and all that. We won't be able to know all of this beforehand, but if you go to strongerbystress.com, and I guess, like, if you click the watch movie, like, or down there on the website, Leigh is on the cover.
I know that guy.
Man, you're famous on iTunes. So it's on the paid side. But if you want to do a favor for us and you're from the US, please go to iTunes and pre-order Stronger by Stress documentary. You help us a lot because the preview or pre-order numbers are a big deal when it comes to launching documentaries like this nowadays, and also being able to push this to other networks. Check the trailer. It's amazing. Like, there's so much crap in terms of health and wellness on the different streaming platforms like Netflix. Honestly, even though we are in this, honestly, this is the best biohacking documentary and health documentary in general I've seen for a long time. The editing is amazing. It's just like, the information is top notch. It's cool stuff, man. Yeah. and Leigh is there. You see the Finnish nature and Estonian nature in it as well.
Yeah. It was fun filming that, for sure.
Yeah, it's cool, man. You have a nice T-shirt. Tell me a story about that. Is that taking us in?
You might have recognized. Yeah, this is my sort of little creation. Nasal breathing. You know, everybody knows that probably one of the best biohacking things you can do for your breath is breathe through the nose, and then of course went ahead and used the element. You know, element for air is replacing the A. Yeah, it looks familiar to some other brands that are out there potentially, but it's a brand that I created, all about breathing, a breathing brand. So yeah, some T-shirts and all the usual stuff, but also some breathing gear as well that'll help people with their functional breathing.
Yeah. So, well, people watching, please type in the chat wherever you are, if you're on the Biohacker Summit channel or on our Facebook channels or whatever, type in where are you dialing in.
Yeah.
Have you done Wim Hof Method, different breathing techniques, any of that stuff, rip Joe Rogan. I mean, I don't think he's pretty much immortal now. I don't think he's going to be erased from history anymore. he's pretty much in history, but Yeah, but for sure, like if you look for sauna expertise, like you're in the right channel right now. So
Was it Rip or
type in
Ripped Joe Rogan? I don't know.
ripped, not in peace. Rest in ripped. So, let's see. Yeah. Anyway, so what are we going to be talking about today? So I guess like a lot of people are interested in Wim Hof for sure. Like type in the chat, by the way, if there's like any specific topics that you want to be covered when it comes to breathing. Like, have you done like different techniques? Like I've done like one of my like big things that I've done in terms of breathing has been the different Usahi breathing techniques, like breathing like slowly through the nose and making this kind of sound, and like really doing like 3-4-7 or any kind of extended breaths, as well as box breathing is one of my like favorite stress management techniques. I also use a technique where I'm doubling up the out breath, so breathing 1 second in, 2 seconds out, then 2 seconds in, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out. Basically like trying to mimic someone who just got out of sauna. That's like what I try to do. It's surprisingly effective. And one of the things that I did earlier this year, like I did every single day, I start my day with really deep breathing techniques, and I went through the Wim Hof course and I was like doing all that. But in the end, I combined Sudarshan Kriya, which is a program from Sri Ravi Shankar, and Wim Hof Method. I first did like Wim Hof, then I went to Sudarshan Kriya, and after that I went to 1 minute per one breath per minute kind of breathing pattern.
Yeah,
and that was amazing. Like I just could be there, like tapped into it, like 2 or 3 hours per day. Like I just didn't want to stop doing it. So it's amazing what your own biology can generate. Some of the best.
That's the thing also with the Wim Hof method, Teemu, isn't it? Like that's sort of readily available, and even the online programs kind of like daily practice. But for me, like people are asking me all the time as well, like, so do you? How many rounds of Wim Hof do you do every day? How many rounds? You know how these bodies work. If after once you get going, once you start, maybe 3, 4, 5 rounds of this particular breathings, it sort of works. It feels good. You feel those physical benefits, and then of course you get the scientific benefits of it as well. But I personally like those heavier practices, like as maybe in the back pocket. If you've had that busy week, Friday pops around and you're like, okay, what like I'm still going, like my nervous system's sort of out of control, whatnot. It's nice to have that ready in the back pocket. These bodies are so resilient; they get used to things so quickly that what are you going to do? You're going to do 26 rounds of Wim Hof breathing, and then you sort of defeat the whole purpose. So. Yeah, people are always asking about those heavy techniques and how often to do those, but I like to have those in the back pocket or in the toolbox.
Yeah, also, it's kind of like the way how people make sauna into a competition, like who's longest in a sauna or ice bath, like who's longest in an ice bath.
Yeah,
I guess it's in human nature that we try to be competitive and do all these crazy things, like. But in the end, like you can also overdo these techniques, and it's kind of I think there is like a dose response curve, even to like hyperventilation, that you don't want to do too much of it.
For sure.
But definitely, I try to combine like different protocols. So I do breathing. I combine that with infrared sauna at the same time. Maybe I have some essential oils and humidifier going on at the same time. Maybe I do some chanting.
Binaural beats, maybe.
Binaural beats for sure, like different like meditation soundscapes, spike mats. I just like to stack things, and instead of doing everything like separately, like spike mat, then sauna, then breathing, like your whole day goes into like restorative practices. But if you combine them, they can be surprisingly powerful for sure. And different techniques work better in the context of other. You can also use some substances for sure, like coffee is great for like this kind of fire breathing kind of setup, but it's definitely not good for like trying to relax and chill out, do deep breathing. So there's many things that one can do.
Yeah, and I think also one of the, like just to touch on this Wim Hof thing just a little bit further. I mean, if as you mentioned, it's one of the most popular techniques around the world. You could argue that it's probably brought the most attention towards breathwork in the sort of modern era, if you want to say. But that's often the first touch point for breathwork for people. And, you know, that is a sort of like, if you want to say hyperventilation, it's pretty intensive breathwork. And it doesn't, I mean, eventually you need to learn the basics. You need to learn the biomechanics. You need to know how the breath works and to sort of like breathe for the other 23 hours of the day, you know? So. Yeah.
So, but I think one of the big things that I really like turn my lights on in terms of your input in my own growth and development is the fact that how to do like consciously breathing throughout the day instead of like doing like some practice. Basically, making breathing a practice that is with you every day and all the time. So maybe you can like open up a little bit about breathing and why people breathe in the wrong way. I know you have some slides also to show, but I think that's maybe a good place to start, like how to breathe properly. Like we do it so wrong, I guess, like especially modern people.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the thing. We're all born. A baby's born as a nose breathing human, you know. And if any parents are out there and they've had a child that has like a cold or the congested nose, I mean that's the worst night of sleep that they'd ever have, you know, because the baby can't breathe. Everything's congested. They open their mouth and they're usually crying and whatnot. So we're all born this way. But then what happens over time? I mean, we're a product of our environment. Maybe we sort of like imitate the parents if they've got the mouth hanging open or whatnot. I mean, there's even studies now that show the babies that breathe through their nose longer, throughout the months, years, they actually have a higher IQ. It obviously affects the craniofacial structure, because if you really think about when you're breathing through your mouth, like think about the tongue position. If you're breathing through your mouth, the tongue tends to sit lower, like in the lower part of the jaw. If we breathe through the nose, intuitively the tongue goes to the roof of the mouth. And of course, during those sort of like developmental years of a child, if the tongue is sitting in the roof of the mouth, you know, the craniofacial structure and the roof of the mouth is sort of growing around that. And if there is something there, then it grows, it kind of props that up. That means the airway might be, the airway will be bigger, larger. It'll help them get more air in. And also you can see that in certain people, the facial structure where it's a bit more sort of a squared off jaw, as opposed to like you. I believe you've had a lifetime of good breathing by the looks of it. Maybe myself too. Well, not lifetime, but I mean at least some during the developmental years, you could probably safely assume maybe.
Like you look at my nose structure, or
and that's another thing, right? So even people find it very difficult to breathe through their nose because I think it's something like 3/4 of all people have misshaped nostrils even. So you might have one nostril that's bigger or has more airflow than the other, and for a lot of us that can be a reason why we don't feel that we can breathe through our nose. But like most other things, the more we actually do that thing, like nasal breathing or practice nasal breathing, the more we can actually do it. So it's all about trying to, like you mentioned, the conscious element, being aware of it. How are you breathing? How are you reacting to things? And then sort of like stopping every so often and checking in with yourself after you've answered that horrendous email, or you have the near-death experience in a road rage or something like this. It's like that. It's not until we kind of, unfortunately, if we're unconscious with our breathing, it's not until the proverbial has hit the fan that's when we notice the breathing. We can kind of jump out in front of that and be more in control of the breathing. And a little analogy to sort of highlight or illustrate that is literally like we are the vehicle. We are kind of driving down the road, and most of us, because breathing is an automatic function of the body, we're in the passenger seat. You know, we're kind of like watching the world go by, watching out the window, everything's going by. But then we have the opportunity to sort of jump in the driver's seat, get behind the wheel. You know, you could even say that the inhale is like the gas pedal. But, you know, literally it is like a gas pedal. And the exhale is like the brake. We can get out on the open highway and see what this baby's got under the hood, you know, and take control where we want to take the vehicle, where we want to drive ourselves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I just put this nose ring on, which is expanding the nose.
We're going to do this.
So
Maybe we'll do it both sides.
it's like some constraint of like breathing, like that the other side is more constrained than the other side. Like this definitely opens it up. I don't have big of a problem, so I'm very easily like doing nasal breathing throughout the day myself. But this helps a lot, like especially when I sit on the computer. And one thing that I've noticed, like if I got like some kind of like flu type of symptoms or whatever, like I don't have that much like issues nowadays. Like over 10 years ago, I had more problems with pollen and all that, allergies, so it gets stuck. But I would imagine like something like this would open up situations like that as well pretty well. So it's just a big relief that you're able to breathe.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people are using these for performance too, Teemu, like if you go into the gym or if you're practicing for some sort of, like a marathon or some sort of, whatever your sporting endeavor is. We also know for like factually, if you go outside, especially on a cold winter's day, like here, you can see when we breathe through our mouth, you can see that moisture is leaving the body. It's about 46% more moisture that you maintain inside the body if you're breathing through your nose. Now imagine the effects of that over the course of 20 or 40 kilometers in your half or full marathon. You don't have to stop off to the drink stand so much.
Yeah, and we also have like these hairs in our nose that are supposed to be moist, and that like helps. It's like part of our immune system, so it grabs onto pathogens more easily.
Yeah,
and you need moisture there for those to function well. So,
yeah, cilia they're called. Yeah, it's quite. This is the thing. This is what we're missing out on. If it's like the first biohack of breathing is really to use the nose. Well, adding the conscious element is the first part, but then we want to get someone breathing through the nose straight away. Just because of those sort of hygienic functions, primarily. Obviously, you have the larger hairs on the sort of like the outer part of the nostril that, the ones that we have to pluck out every so often if they become a little bit sort of unsightly or whatever. They prevent the larger particles from going in. And then, as you mentioned, the cilia, which are these kind of like really, really small hairs in the inside of the nostril. They are attracting, and the mucus as well. They attract and trap sort of pathogens, other particles as well, and it's almost as if they're like these, like crowd surfing, like this. It's almost as if they're kind of moving the pathogen or something or whatever is being trapped in there to the back of the throat, which they kind of drop them into a pool of acid. So it's quite a unique. It's a beautifully crafted system if you want to think about it like that. And again, if you don't breathe through your nose, then you miss out on the advantages of those. And I've actually just got this slide here. If you want to, can we pull that up real quick?
Yeah, let's pull it out. Like, please go ahead.
Yeah. Because if you really think about it, we have a whole bunch of, if you want to call it breathing real estate or infrastructure in the face. If you see how much space we have here. Nature doesn't waste any space over all this evolution. It's not as if this stuff doesn't serve a purpose. Now, we just also mentioned before about the position of the tongue inside the mouth. If you really want to see how much space you have, how much distance there is, you can kind of just, if anyone's watching, you can get your tongue, pop it behind the two front teeth, sort of like that, and you can just roll it back on the top of the roof of the mouth. You can feel sort of the hard, soft palate there going back. There's a whole bunch of space there. You can even feel even the top of the roof of the mouth. You can sort of feel how high that is. Some of us have higher roof of the mouth because of the nasal breathing earlier in life. But there's a whole bunch of real estate in here. Now, if you actually think about one of the key benefits of nasal breathing, nitric oxide production. This is a molecule that's being produced inside of the body because of the pressure of the air that enters the nasal airways, and it spins in the paranasal sinus, and it creates a molecule called nitric oxide. I mean, you've probably heard about these nitric oxide diets and people trying to eat a whole bunch of beetroot and stuff like that. Well, you don't have to eat so much beetroot after all, it turns out, because your body's naturally producing this. And the functions of this, I mean, this is an insane amount of health benefits you get from nitric oxide. It's a vasodilator, which means that all of the breathing infrastructure that you have, which is the bronchi and the bronchioli, which is the branchy things inside your lungs, essentially, it will open up all of the airways. Vasodilator means that the blood vessels are opening up. And also, of course, we're talking about antifungal and antibacterial properties. Of course, in recent times, that's a huge thing. That's a really, really big thing, because it means that, let me just take it back. If you think about this, right? If you're breathing in through your nose and you're producing nitric oxide and you don't have this exit point through the mouth, think about the nitric oxide almost treating all of this infrastructure. It's kind of wandering around or kind of filtering around all of this breathing infrastructure and finding the pathogens, the bacterias, and the fungus, and it's actually destroying those. I mean, this is an amazing biohack, natural biohack, and we just, sadly, many of us are missing out on this because we've got the mouth hanging open, breathing all the time through the mouth.
I see. Okay, so when it comes to like nasal breathing versus mouth breathing, like if you just list like the different like benefits of doing like nasal breathing versus breathing through your mouth, like is there any benefit of breathing through your mouth? Like in what situations would that be okay? Why nasal breathing is superior?
Well, to be honest, I think the main I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, like the default method of breathing should be nasal breathing for 23 hours of the day. I'm kind of saying 23 hours of the day, 23 hours of the day you should be breathing through your nose. Yes, that includes sleep. You should always be breathing through the nose during sleep, because it's, you'll get calmer, more relaxed. You won't get bad breath or anything like this in the morning. It'll help you sleep. And the only time I'm recommending breathing through your mouth is in the Wim Hof Method techniques, or some of these heavier ones where you're trying to pull air in faster, or then on an exhale, it's very, very handy in dumping CO2. So if you're like in, sporting endeavors, training, whatsoever, dumping the CO2 becomes more of a something that's going to help you sort of with your performance. But to be honest with you, there's not I'm recommending all the time breathing as often as you can for the rest of your life through your nose.
One thing that I'm kind of aware of also is breathing rate per minute. Yep. But if you kind of slow down your breathing rate per minute, I think that's synced into your heart rate. So if you like get a lower resting heart rate, you breathe more deeply, more slowly throughout the day.
Yep.
Is that like something that goes naturally down with exercise, and can you practice for it like consciously?
Yeah, of course you can. We can actually go over to this slide. I think this probably explains it best. When we talk about connected breath, we're talking more about the three elements that kind of bring the breathing together and help people with their functional breathing. There's a biomechanical part of this, or a component of this. Now, when we keep in mind that, so many people forget that the key trigger to actually release oxygen from the blood is the CO2. So we actually need a rise in CO2 levels before the oxygen will release the blood from the hemoglobin, right? So we always have oxygen circulating through the body, but it's not until we get that CO2 buildup that the oxygen wants to be delivered. Now, we all know what a hyperventilation looks like. It's somebody who doesn't have control of their breathing. They're sort of like panting almost. They're sort of like this. It's not as if you can tell that person, hey, just come on, just breathe the air in. they are doing that, right? They're breathing in, but then also what's happening is the CO2 is being expelled just straight away until we make an intervention. It's the brown paper bag. The person breathes into the brown paper bag. CO2 goes in the brown paper bag, goes back in the body. And of course, we know what happens. It rises the CO2. Now, how do we do that throughout the day, throughout the 22 hours of the day? We simply add a little pause to the breath. So we'll be inhaling, little pause, and then we can exhale. So that gives a little bit of a moment for the CO2 level to rise and gives a bit better oxygen delivery. So that's what we mean when we're talking a little bit about the biochemical aspect of the breath, sorry. And then, of course, you mentioned just now the cadence of the breath, or the sort of rate of the breath. This is a big factor as well when we talk about breathing, because, we all know that, like we can also talk about the optimal rate of breath, which is actually 6 to 10 breaths every minute. 6 to 10 breaths every minute. For a lot of us, that seems quite less, sorry. But it's very, very achievable. Again, if we sort of like hack the breath, if we start playing around with the length of the inhale, maybe some pauses both after the inhale and then sort of after the exhale, we start to kind of like toy or stretch the overall breath out a little bit more, and we can slow it down. Then also the last part of this is sort of the biomechanics, and that's more breathing deeper. And what we mean is breathing deeper in the body. Like my mum would always say, if I was super excited and I was running around, it's like, mom, da, da, da. She's like, okay, take a deep breath. And I'd be sort of like, now, if you really think about that, that doesn't do anything but probably excite me more, right? It's not serving any real purpose. The idea of the deep breath is breathing deeper into the body, which means engaging the diaphragm, sort of belly breathing. If people have been practicing these in yoga or pranayama breathing techniques, where we're breathing down deeper. The idea of breathing deeper also sort of coincides with the, deeper in the lungs, or the lower lobes of the lungs. That's where the majority of the blood vessels are. So that's where the oxygen will be released if we're engaging that part of the lungs and the diaphragm at the same time. And then these three components kind of like sort of come together, and the optimal way to breathe is nasal. You can hit all of these three sort of key markers, if you want, or the pillars of a sort of, functional breath by nasal breathing. It's intuitive. I mean, anyone listening right now, everyone's done this test before, I'm sure, where you kind of you feel how you breathe when you breathe in through your mouth. You can kind of see my shoulders moving, but then if I breathe through my nose, it's much less defined. You can't see actually the breath at all. It's much more easier for the body. And then we start looking at what parts of the body are engaged. When we breathe through the nose, we don't. When we breathe through our mouth, the whole rib cage is expanding. All the intercostal muscles are moving, which requires more blood, more oxygen. And then we're not getting the bang for the buck for the breath. We want to breathe less. That's actually the key here. Breathing less is the most optimal way.
That's amazing. Now, there's all these kind of force techniques. So of course there's like the fact that you basically breathe without conscious thought, but then there's ways of controlling breathing. And there's one thing about the autonomic nervous system, which we thought that it's autonomous, that it's kind of involuntary, it's doing its own thing without voluntary control. But there is actually a part of that autonomous nervous system that we have very conscious and direct access to, which is through our breathing. And through our breathing, we can access the vagus nerve, we can access like a lot of physiological processes. So in the end, we can control the subconscious part of the nervous system in a conscious way by using conscious and deliberate breathing techniques, and of course, sensing your body. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that as well, like what's happening there?
Yeah, for sure.
Take control.
Yeah. So we go back to this sort of vehicle analogy. The exhale really is the brake pedal, and you touched on it as well. The vagus nerve is a key factor in this. The vagus, every exhale, we're stimulating the vagus nerve, which lowers the heart rate, amongst other things. Of course, it has a sort of direct line into many of the key processes in the body, digestion and whatnot. But primarily, I mean, on every exhale, we're stimulating the vagus nerve, and that means we're having a direct relationship with the heart, or slowing the heart rate down. You can see this with your, if you've got these like, checking the blood oxygen saturation, you can see this, that on every inhale, the heart rate increases, and on every exhale, it decreases. And I think you mentioned also as well, some of the techniques to do this are doubling up or sometimes even lengthening the exhale to a point where it's, we just almost empty the lungs on an exhale. And you're finding people that are getting so, like their heart, like Stig Severinsen is one of the people that I've trained with. He's a free diver, and he was able to slow his heart rate down to 8 or 10 beats in a minute. It's like incredible amount of like almost like some sort of monk or, Tibetan monk or something like this. But he does it through deep pranayama practices, a series of sort of mind, imagery, and if you want to say it like this. But then prior to that, he's already slowing his heart rate down, where he's breathing maybe once every couple of minutes or something like this. Like one inhale, exhale would equal almost like 2 minutes. So he's already slowing the heart rate down. And then obviously he's sort of in the water as well, where you start activating the mammalian diver response, which lowers the heart rate even more. So there's a lot of things like this is interesting stuff. Like freediving is like a real biohacking area. They've really gone in deep on the sort of breathing practices, using the traditional techniques, but then also understanding the role of science and understanding really how to lower the heart rate. But it's all done through the exhale. Exhale is really, really the way to do, like the way to slow things down. And then we kind of touched on this sort of maybe off air before, humming. Humming's a way to really stimulate the vagus nerve and create a lot, maybe 20-fold nitric oxide in the body too, because of the vibration in the facial area, craniofacial region. And this will slow your heart rate down as well.
Right. Yeah. I like to, when I go for ice bath, I like to do this kind of throat singing type of thing. Well, actually, it's more like this overtone singing, this Western style, than actual throat singing, which is a very specific technique. But there's something about it which like really helps me to be much longer in the ice bath, doing just like something like something like that. It's like you don't have to be, the best ever. It's just like a way of coping as well. And somehow the time slows down. I just forget like where I am, and I'm no longer bothered by the signals that my body is sending when I do that. So I just like to play around with that.
You're good at it too, to be honest. You like it in the sauna too. I've heard you be doing some singing in the sauna.
Yeah, it's like it takes some time to really open up your vocal cords in a way, and then really like going to it. But I recommend people to just try it. You don't be ashamed of yourself. Like this is very primal, natural howling that we do, and it's beneficial for sure. And there's some kind of like tribal connection part. It kind of activates something really ancient in us, and connection when you do that with a group of people. And that's how I build a lot of friends in the Biohacker Summit, because we have there this great thermogenic spa sauna area, and I just go there and I just do some throat singing with some random people, and we're brothers and sisters right after that.
Teemu, just on that as well, like seriously, if you really look back through different tribes and groups of people, breath has been a connecting factor always. I think it's important to mention, because if you really think of, for example, like the Vikings, if they're rowing the boat together, there's sort of like a like this. You look at an orchestra and how they're working together, they need to be singing together, breathing in harmoniously together, a wind ensemble, or even the act of making love. Yeah, the act of making love. I mean, it's a big part of the connective factor is that the breathing synchronizes. And that's a beautiful thing. That's where the sort of magic comes out in the breathing, and something else that sometimes we can't explain through science. There's this sort of like extra something that's created, like we kind of experienced in the Biohackers retreat, this beautiful connectivity, and a whole bunch of people from around the world end up in one place together, and we're laying on the not just on any floor, but this beautiful the acoustics in the room were perfect. The sound is traveling around the room beautifully. And after, everyone looks at each other in a different way. We're kind of, like you said, we're all brothers and sisters, or, we're kind of connected. And that's what what breathing, just breathing, can actually achieve, or it sort of bonds us a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually some questions here, like Tiavana Rakotatsi, butchered that one. What are your thoughts on the Wim Hof breathing techniques? I guess that's kind of one of the most obvious things for people to ask. So why don't we tackle the Wim Hof off the map straight away, and
Sure.
so we can go to other things as well. But like, I think it's very important to bring out.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I'm an instructor of the method. I've gone into the method. I entered the whole training system and the whole methodology through the cold, through the ice bath, through the avanto uinti, as we call it here in Finland, the hole in the ice. And the sort of role of the breath when you're in the cold was fascinating to me, like Teemu mentioned as well. It's sort of like a bit of a remote control for the nervous system and a lot of different functions in the body. And I love the method. It's great. I think people should, everyone, it's a space for everybody's breathing practice, or sort of like their down regulation, if you will, using the Wim Hof method. But then again, my only thing with that is, like, I don't necessarily use that every day. I really do like to have it when I want it and when I need it. But my body adapts, like everybody's body adapts to things very quickly. And I just like to feel those effects, the tingling sensations. Sometimes you do get some of the geometry, and so maybe even lucid dreaming and whatnot. It's some terrific things that happen that aren't totally explained by science, or you can't view on your Garmin watch or whatever. But those things sort of subside if we're doing like 50 rounds of that. So it's just kind of go easily. And of course, always the Wim Hof method technique is not something that we should do whilst we're near the water. The breathing techniques that Teemu alluded to earlier, with the lengthening of the exhale, are more in line with what we want to be doing when we're in the cold water. Otherwise, you can kind of you can feel a bit dizzy, woozy, and if you pass out in the water, it's not usually a good thing.
Definitely not. You're going to be sleeping with the fishes faster than you think. Now, like, I mean, maybe you can go through some of the different breathing techniques. Like, there's Jonna Huittinen is also asking, when exercising, I usually use nose breath when breathing in and mouth breath when breathing out. Should I be breathing through the nose all the time when exercising? Doesn't matter. It's a question like that. Prime Human Info is also asking about what would be the best breathing technique to get a grip of the vagal tone. So I guess we can kind of look at the different techniques.
Yeah, sure. When we're talking about, I would say like a fundamental practice or like a breathing methodology, if you want to call it this, is like this oxygen advantage. It's really looking at the basics of breathing. It's looking extensively at the science behind the breathing as well, but it's really carving out the basic breathing, like full stop, like this 20 to 23 hours per day, nasal breathing practices all the way. Then we start looking at, we're starting to use the same practices, like we all know that when we're in a yoga class and we breathe through our nose for the first time, it's something feels different. It feels nice. It feels like, I could keep this asana or this position or the concentration of this pose or posture in the yogic practice. We can keep that a little bit longer, more sustained. And when we take that to the performance arena, like I think it was Jonna, you said, is mentioning, she's on the right track, because she's mentioning that she breathes through the nose, inhale, which is perfect because you do get the benefits of all the nitric oxide, you get the filtration system. It's generally speaking, it's an easier air. then it sounds like she might be doing something where she needs to expel or dump some of the CO2 when it's raising too high. But to start with, if she's not already doing this, or other people that are watching or listening, nasal breathing in and out as long as you can throughout the workout is going to help you for all the reasons we've mentioned prior, hygienic, but then of course the retention of water is a big one. And then of course, when we're breathing, as much as we're breathing through the nose, we're not engaging all these other skeletal muscular tissues where that requires blood and oxygen. So it's called blood stealing. Blood stealing. It's a bit vampirish by the sound of it, but it really does steal sort of the blood and the oxygen away from, if you're running, you need that in your legs, obviously. And you don't necessarily hope to have so much blood and oxygen in the intercostal muscles or the surrounding or supporting muscles around the chest and rib cage area. So sort of cadence breathing. And that can also be like doubling down on the exhale too as well, or dumping off, like having a larger sort of on as you're running. But then when you look at other techniques, it's really, there's so many different techniques dependent upon what's your intention and what's your what state you want to upregulate. Breath of fire is something that I know you like to do, Teemu, as well. Breath of fire, which is very sort of this is like generating energy in the body. This is really going for it. Wim Hof Method breathing is also another one of these sort of super heavy techniques. Circular breathing or sort of rebirthing breathing is also a little bit like this. And then, of course, we move towards one of the most, extreme might be a bit too much, but one of the sort of more intensive practices, which is the holotropic breath work, which is very, very, this is sort of like a quick demonstration of this is... And this might last for like 1 hour. And it's a very interesting practice. It's one which requires a minder or somebody to sort of help, for every one person practicing the breathing, there will be one person sort of assisting each participant. So almost like a personal minder, because it's one of these breathing techniques that really doesn't give you so much to hold on to. The other practices, Wim Hof Method, again, is a great one because you breathe in, out, like this, but then you have these lovely pauses where you can kind of like, it's sort of like a flux-like breath work practice where it gives you a little bit more moment to chill and relax inside the body before you start again. It just depends. It depends what kind of breathing, what's your intention and where you want to go with the breathing. But generally speaking, more breathing faster and through the mouth means it's going to give you more energy, and slower breathing, nasal breathing with longer exhales is going to be more of a down regulation kind of technique, I would say.
Gotcha. I think you have like some illustrative images or pictures to like kind of like show these different patterns. So maybe you can pull out some slides and show people.
There was one that was just going to maybe even just get people rolling through, and that was the 478 breathwork technique. Very simple. A lot of people, I actually love this one because if you really break it down, if you really think about this, it is actually doubling up on the exhale. It is that 1-to-2 ratio that we mentioned earlier. But it also has this lovely pause in the middle, and the pause will, as illustrated here, kind of gives you a moment or a little bit of time for the CO2 to rise, get the oxygen delivery, or you get the oxygen load dumped out from the blood, from the hemoglobin, and then it really, really calms the nervous system. This is a perfect breathing technique to sort of implement just before you going to sleep of an evening. And I'm always recommending this, for children, because let's say like this, the first time I ever meditated was when I was breathing, Teemu. I never was able, I couldn't get it personally. I couldn't do it. If somebody told me, hey, Leigh, clear your mind, don't think of anything. I'm sitting there saying, don't think of anything. And then my brain says, okay, the fact that you're saying to yourself, don't think of anything, is already thinking of something. So you've already blown it. So for me, just counting breathing, counting the breaths, or even the time of the breaths, like the 4, 7, 8, just counting seconds, it was like a bit of a game changer for me. And I would say that was the first time I was truly able to meditate, was where I was just simply counting the breaths. So what do you say, Teemu? Should we roll through? Should we go through a couple of, like a minute or two of the 4-7-8, or what do you think?
Yeah, we can definitely do like a little circle here.
Yeah, sure.
Demonstrate.
And you know, actually, what if I've got it here as well? Actually, if we can go for this slide really quickly as well, this might be a good time to pull this one out, because look, this is the resting respiratory rate by age for different demographics of people. Obviously, we know that a child is more likely to breathe quite fast, and in this case, it's 30 to 40 breaths per minute for a young child. Obviously, the breathing infrastructure, the lungs, nothing's been really developed. So, like, just think for a moment how that is. If you're breathing 30 or 40 times in a minute, I mean, that's sort of like, just like this.
Because of so they just need to circulate the air more quickly, or why is that?
Yeah, no, well, they're growing. Nothing's been developed. The diaphragm, the lungs. They're just like little meat bags just being brought into the world. There's nothing been strengthened yet. So then if you start looking at a child that's 6 months, we start looking at about 25 breaths per minute. 3 years, it goes down. That you can start to see the correlation between the growth and the usage of all the development of the breathing infrastructure, if you want to call it, all the breathing muscles, the diaphragm itself, rib cage, intercostal muscles, everything's starting to be strengthened and used a lot more. We start going down, and then we go to probably where most of us who are tuning in fit into here, and that's sort of around this anywhere from sort of 16 to 20 breaths in a minute. Now, 16 to 20 breaths in a minute is still pretty high, actually, when, you have to excuse my, if you look right on the end, the Zen level is somewhere between 6 to 12 breaths in a minute. 6 to 12 breaths in a minute. Obviously, we all know what happens when you get a little bit older. Your lung capacity, changes. You lose some of that, the strength. There's different diseases and conditions that people get over time, but we lose a little bit of the lung capacity over, I think it's about 1% every year or something like this after the age of 60, for example. And, it's why it's important to have really, really healthy breathing mechanics. Obviously, strengthening the diaphragm, having a really, really flexible rib cage and intercostal muscles. A lot of people don't remember or sort of forget that if you didn't have this big cage kind of like containing our lungs, the lungs would like to actually inflate a little bit more. They would like to, not a whole bunch more, but they would keep going, but except for this rib cage. Now, if we have a flexible rib cage, then the lungs have a little bit more room to pull the air in. And that's sort of like a bit of a trick. That's why, it's all the yogis have really, really good, you're seeing these 60, 70, 80-year-old yogis that are really flexible, have no problems with their breathing whatsoever, even at later stages of life, because they have very, very healthy respiratory health in every single which way. All the biomechanics, the way they breathe, the nasal breathing developments there, lifetime of nasal breathing. So that's where we want to be. And the reason why I actually brought that one up was because if we practice this 4-7-8 breathing technique, we can find pretty quickly that we can slow the rate of the breath down, and we can see that within a minute we can really drop down really, really into the lower levels and go towards that Zen level rate where we're talking 6 to 12 breaths in a minute. So if we if we go around, if we just do like a couple of rounds, like a couple of cycles of this really quickly, Go ahead.
Just a quick note. I was just looking at my Aura data, for my average per night breathing rate. It's showing around 14 times per minute. And I noticed that there's some months where I'm really pushing myself, where it actually might go up to even 16 or 15. Maybe 16 is a bit extreme on some. There's some averages like that. but like otherwise it's around 14. So would that be like a good number in our data, like, or should I get it to 10 level?
I think
for breathing?
that's a pretty good number, to be honest, Teemu. That's a good resting respiratory rate for sure. Of course, it can always be better, but then again, it's we start to worry. You're breathing through your nose, I'm assuming, in the nighttime as well, right?
Like, is there like some studies or something like, do you know if I would be like a mouth breather, if that would be faster? Or is like naturally if you breathe through your nose, your respiration rate is lower?
Well, it is. I'm not aware of this. I'm sure there's the studies. Like I don't have any that I could just pull out the numbers of those. But we know for sure that once you're breathing through your nose, you're actually engaging the diaphragm. There's less, like I said, there's less different muscles or parts of the body that have been engaged. If you're breathing through your mouth, without doubt, you're going to be using much more blood and oxygen in other parts, which means the heart rate's going to increase, and which means that you're going to breathe a little bit, like the respiratory rate will be higher. So, yep, if you're breathing through your nose, it's again the way to go. And also, people are using those little nasal dilators at nighttime. You know, the little ones we've been talking about on and off here. People are using those because it gives them a little possibility. It gives them a little possibility to breathe through the nose a little bit longer, and then we're kind of we're going to get to the 4-7-8 in a minute. But if we bring this slide up as well, this is another thing, a very big. You've probably seen many people. This is not some sort of Joe Rogan kind of speech thing here, but this is actually a little biohack that a lot of biohackers are picking up on, and that's taping in the mouth of the nighttime. So for some people that have noticed that they're not breathing correctly in the nighttime, the signs of this are sort of like dry mouth in the morning. If you have dry mouth in the morning, it tends to mean that your mouth's been open. Bad breath is also a little bit of part of that. So if you've got that sort of like, that bit tack mouth kind of breath in the morning, the chances are you've been breathing a little bit more through the mouth. And so people start taping their mouth, right? And where they come unstuck, well, no pun intended, but is if they put the tape across the lips like this way, like horizontally across, because they feel like the purpose of the tape is to actually seal the mouth. Now, this is not at all what we want to achieve. What we want is just the lips to be kind of pressed together. And we can easily achieve that by just putting the tape sort of vertically like this. So anyone who wants to use, you can just use this porous tape or sort of like that, not that hardcore like duct tape or anything like this. Otherwise you lose, or, you lose the beard and the moustache, or maybe you want that anyway. So maybe you can do that. But
If you're not time, right?
Yeah, and just keep going up the nose as well and just rip everything away. But if you just put one strip of tape up like this, it will give a prompt for the lips to close and the mouth to stay shut, and the likelihood of you maintaining nasal breathing is improved drastically. People are noticing the effects from 3 to 7 days of this. The first couple of nights can be a bit funny, a bit different, for example. But as we say, the sort of breathing technique of this 4-7-8 is a good one because it'll calm everything down. Then you can kind of apply the tape. Then you doze off to sleep, and it's really a nice. That's a little bit of a stack, That's like the sleep hack as well. Obviously, the pillow and the position of the head whilst you sleep will play some role in whether the mouth is sort of open or closed, whether you can maintain nasal breathing, but. Allowing the nervous system to sort of relax and calm, and then applying the tape, you should be able to achieve nasal breathing, even if you're not a nasal breather by default at this point. And right. So,
okay, let's go.
Let's do it. Okay,
something.
So I'll do. Let's do something. Yes. We're basically just going to stick with this 4-7-8 technique. I'll count us in. We're going to be breathing in through our nose. So we're going to try and take a nice deep inhalation in for 4 seconds. Then we're going to take the pause for 7 seconds. And then for many of us, breathing, it might be possible, Teemu, the Ujjayi breathing, so maybe it's possible for you to maintain a nasal exhale. But for those of you who this is a little bit new, what you can do is you can sort of purse your lips together like you're breathing through a straw, and you just exhale just like this. Okay. So let's give it a go. In 3, 2, 1, we're going to breathe in through the nose. 2, 3, 4. Find that little pause at the top for 7 seconds. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Finding the exhale, you can breathe like you're breathing through a straw, through the lips. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and inhaling through the nose for 4 seconds. 2, 3, 4. Finding the pause at the top for 7 seconds. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now to the exhale again. So breathing, lengthening that exhale. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more time through. So breathing in through the nose. Nice deep inhalation through the nose. 3 and 4. Finding the pause at the top. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And last exhale, breathing through your lips, pursed, or if you can, breathe through your nose for 8 seconds. 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So just relax now, find your natural rate of breath comfortably. The beauty of this technique is when we're talking about the optimal rate of breath, when we're talking about 6 to 12 breaths in a minute, think about what we just did. If we have a look at the actual technique itself, if we really just count, 4 plus 7 plus 8 is 19. That gives us almost 20 seconds. If we do this 3 times in 1 minute, that would be 58 seconds, right? So if we're counting this as a breath, this would get us down to 3 breaths in 1 minute. And so it's very achievable to sort of lower the rate of breath drastically when we start kind of chopping and changing and sort of hacking into restructuring the breath. So that's why it's a good one.
All right. So what other guided settings, like what do you think of box breathing? Would you use this instead of box breathing? Like, is it more effective?
Well, box breathings come from the Navy SEALs, right? I mean, the Americans have been using this as a way to sort of, I guess like maybe snipers and, in these kind of military settings using this as a way to focus. So it's known for this. It's a nice one because it doesn't relax too much. I think the lengthening of the exhales really slows the heart rate down, and you want to have a little bit more of a, you don't want to kind of like drift, like have the heart rate going down, down, down all the way. You sort of want to be sort of on point or sort of cognizant of the duties and tasks. So for box breathing, 4 second in, 4 second pause, 4 second exhale, and 4 second pause. Yeah, it's a great one for a focus. It's a nice one you can do in between meetings. It's a nice one you can do even during a meeting. If somebody's sort of like talking for a little while or giving a presentation, you can kind of like give yourself this sort of little focused moment of breathing for a few minutes. Yeah, it's a very popular one, but it's not something that it's not in a facilitated setting. It's more like it's in the personal toolbox that I or someone might use during the day. It's a little bit like 4-7-8 breathwork technique. It's something that you would sort of pull out of the bag during the day when you want to calm things down, or in the nighttime.
Right. Gotcha. So there's some questions about technology, like Aerofit from Cornell. If Aerofit breathing trainer works, I guess you have one of those there, so you can maybe demonstrate that one. And also the breath belt would be nice to see as well.
I'll try and put this together really quickly.
So Leigh's getting some tech out and showing. Yeah, if you have any questions, by the way, on the stream, like please like throw your questions over. We'd be happy to answer. Okay, Leigh has the device here.
Yeah, so for the Aerofit here, and it comes along with there's an application here as well. So You can kind of see it here. The device itself is pretty simple, actually. It's not like heavy or anything like this. It's mainly like plastic components. The sensors are actually inside. You have adjustable. You can adjust the volume of the inhale, like the how much the air or is restricted on the inhale and exhale. And then, for example, it has different breathing, like sort of different breathing programs on here. And one that I like to do a little bit as well is sort of, when we look here, there is a lung test. So there's a lung test on here. And what we can do, for some reason it needs to know my location. Thank you for this. And so what we do is, that's the beautiful thing. It's quite simple. You put it in your mouth. I actually hold it like this. So I'm going to, not almost like I wasn't a former cigarette smoker, by the way, even though my hands want to do this. You put it in the mouth, and the app will show, it's now telling me to empty my lungs. So we're going to do like a lung capacity test here. I'll just do one live here. So we'll empty the lungs.
Can you show the screen also here? Cool. Inhale. Exhale. Full force.
Something like this. So what it's telling me here, if you can see this, it's telling me, can I see this? It's saying that my lung volume was a little bit down. That wasn't really the cleanest run I've ever had. It's saying 4.7 liters, which is like way down from, I'm not just saying this for the cameras, but yeah, usually I'm up around 5.5, 5.7, to be honest with you, after I do some stretching in the morning. But you can kind of keep track of your lung capacity. So this is a really nice function of this. Some of the other breathing, we can finish that one. When you go through, you've got sort of like elevation. It's a nice one. So it kind of imitates, let's have a look here. It sort of imitates altitude training, things like that. So it's almost, it puts a lot more load on your breathing so that it's almost like simulated altitude training. And other various breathing practices, it might strengthen the diaphragm and sort of like maintain optimal breathing mechanics, have you more breathing through the nose, keeping the control of the diaphragm as well, and actually some other breath holding sort of programs that are quite good and useful for if you're a free diver or if you're doing sports where it requires anything that, any sport really is kind of related to the breathing. But that's the AeroFit. And if the question is, does it work? It's again, a little bit again, what kind of, what you're looking for. I think that, to be honest with you, some of us out there some of us are sort of like self-guided. And, I know, Teemu, you've been practicing and studying different breathing techniques for many, many, many years. You sometimes reading books and things like that. You haven't needed the technologies. For some of us need to know the numbers. We want to see numbers. We want to have something where we can kind of revert to that or refer to that and watch a progress or see how things unfold. So in that case, I think the AeroFit really works. I would say personally, the function that I like the most is the lung capacity. And there are once in a while I do some of the other altitude training things, but not so much of the normal day-to-day exercises. I think, that's a sort of like a personal thing. So that's the AeroFit. It's easy. I don't know. I have no idea how much it costs, to be honest. I got sent this one out because I was training in Denmark with one of the co-founders of this one. But it's been around now for a while, and they're sort of constantly updating the application so that people can, they're adding more and more content there so people can get different breathing and breathwork experiences.
Yeah. So AeroFit is great. And if you don't know your breathing pattern and how many times you breathe and what your lung capacity is, that's a quick, easy way to test on that. The Oura Ring will give you the resting respiration rate at night, which is cool to know as well. And we will actually have the RFID at some point at biohackercenter.com store. So if you go to biohackercenter.com store, you can find all kinds of cool things. One device we do have there, and it's called the Breath Belt. And Leigh actually has the Breath Belt in the Biohacker studios now, and he can maybe demonstrate what that's good for. So you can use some aids to help you learn breathe correctly. So there was actually a question about an exercise. So like what would be the best breathing technique for exercise? So would that be a device that you would use, for example, when you lift weights, like heavy lifts or something like that?
Yeah, 100%. It's essentially it is a weight belt. Like it is sort of like, it's quite thin. It's not bulky, but it's completely flexible. So it wraps around the waist really well, and it wraps around twice. It has two different straps, so it actually wraps around the waist and kind of keeps its form, really tight. A lot of people have been watching. There's the traditional belts in the gym, and those leather ones, and they have the big two teeth, the two teeth that kind of go in, and they have the holes. And you see that people have made their own holes out of it. So, well, the flexibility of this one's one of the advantages. But then also, what is sort of key, and I think you can probably see this if we can get a good view of that, is you can kind of see these pockets here. And these are really good because what they do is when the belt's around the back, on each side, you're talking about L4, like right down the lower part of the back, L3, you can put something inside the pockets, and it gives you this a stimulus there to breathe into. So when you have a breathing and you're under load, and you're under load, you may be doing some squats, you may be doing sort of deadlifting. And one of the biggest problems is the psoas. The psoas is we all know what the psoas is. It's basically this stabilizing muscle that connects basically the upper torso with the legs. And if we don't support the psoas, then all other muscles are sort of starting to be engaged, and the psoas becomes really, really tight, and people experience a crazy amount of pain, and also can injure themselves when they're in the gym, and it creates really poor biomechanics in the body. And this will help you with your lift. I'm not joking when I say that I can probably lift 5 to 10% more on average when I'm wearing this belt. Actually, I haven't. It's been such a while since I've always wearing this belt actually. And the part where it connects in with the breathing is that you're kind of breathing into those. Some people are using kind of squash balls in there because they're quite still flexible, it's a bit spongy still. Some people are using tennis balls, a bit harder, especially like bulkier people that are really trying to in performance deadlifting or squatting and things like that. But it kind of forces you to breathe into the balls, so to say. I promised I wasn't going to say that on the air, but you're kind of breathing into the where the balls are positioned, and it's helping you breathe more through the diaphragm and keeping, we know that the diaphragm's connected to your spine, and this is sort of like what we need for optimal posture. It's perfect for our posture. And that also means that people that are sitting in different, at desks all day, or having these kind of standing, their work requires a lot of standing. This is a great belt to help and support their breathing. And people have been mentioning in one of the big surveys they did with the breath belt that the effects, the breathing cues are still present 4 to 6 hours after wearing the belt. So this is really nice thing if you're sort of like, even if you're, wearing it during the day at work, you're still noticing when you're at home that you want to breathe using the belly breath, using your diaphragm, and keeping the spine sort of erect and with good posture. So that's the breath belt.
Nervous system.
Yeah, of course, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. So you can get the breath belt at biohackercenter.com. It's available now. We ship globally. It's a really cool device, and it's definitely something that you may want to use when you do workouts to breathe in the proper way. And if the story is true that it lasts like 5-6 hours, if you do it every day, like it will last the rest of the day. You will be breathing in a more effective way. So that's a cool little biohack for anyone. And I guess it also helps with posture. So that's something.
Yeah,
I
people are
definitely
wearing it
need.
through the day. People are wearing it through the day, and people in the health service industry, if they're often lifting, sometimes they have incapacitated people that they need to sort of move from place to place. This is really helping people. People in law enforcement are using these belts as well. And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of I think the NFL and these larger American sports, collegiate sports systems are using these as well. So they've kind of really, they're widely used in performance, in the performance world, in the performance setting.
So there's a benefit for a man also to have a corset. So
yes, that's one of the other side effects, you could say.
Yeah. So there's a few questions about what would asthma get better with specific breathing techniques? That's one question. The other question is from Ubedir is about alternative nostril yogic breathing, that they say that left nostril inhale relaxes and the right nostril inhale energizes. So do you have any comment on these two like approaches, like one for breathing techniques for asthma and the other one about this alternative nostril stuff?
Yeah, the first one, I would never say we could like cure asthma in a way. We don't like to use the word cure, but we can certainly remove plenty, if not all, of the symptoms of asthma when we start breathing in different ways and using nasal breathing again. I've got this illustration of what sort of natural rate of breath could be. If you want to, yeah, there we go. So this is what a normal breathing looks like. And then if we start toying around with the breath just a little bit, sort of like we did before with the 4-7-8 breathing technique, lighter breathing through the nose, and having somebody sort of have a high tolerance of CO2. So for many of us, if we're like, many of us probably experience this if we're doing a diving and doing some stuff under the water, or maybe we're doing some cardiovascular training, we start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. You might get that warm flush or whatsoever when there's a bit extra CO2 pumping around, coursing through the veins. So what we want to do with people is train them so that they can actually tolerate this. They feel a bit more comfortable with the rising levels of CO2. And this in turn has proven time and time again to, like, when we slow someone's breath down, we have them breathing through the nose again. We have them breathing into the belly, not using the mouth, not using the upper chest and the shoulders and whatnot. Good posture included. Using the diaphragm, letting the diaphragm do its natural function, which is creating the negative pressure, allowing oxygen to enter, and then slowing the exhale down. This is the way that we're sort of in a way treating the symptoms of asthma and other respiratory related issues. So slowing the breath down, adding little pauses like this. It sounds counterintuitive because a lot of people that have asthma, it's a scary thing. Let's be honest. It's a scary thing if you don't know or you don't understand where the next breath's coming from. We know this. We know, like, we've all experienced that in some way, shape, or form. I myself had childhood sort of asthma, and that was a very stress-related thing. It would pop up in different sporting situations that I was in. If I was like kind of pushing a little bit hard, I'd just lose the breathing, and it's a very scary thing. But slowing everything down and breathing through your nose, it is the number one way to treat these things. Now, the other question we had also was, let me just check. It was the alternate nostril breathing. So I've got
about like that, like inhale relaxes from the left, inhale from the right energizes. So is there like a physiological proof for this, or is it just like some folk info?
Well, in the yogic world, I think I'm just kind of cycling through here to find you something that might give some kind of context through that. Basically, there is this sort of like notion that the left nostril is sort of like the female, the feminine, and that's more sort of active in the morning, in the earlier part of the day, the feminine energy, and then later on, and happens for a lot of people that they also, here we go. Ida is the sort of like the feminine, which is, if we look at for most of us, estrogen is the estrogen levels increase in the morning. And then more towards the afternoon is where the testosterone levels increase in our bodies, which is more of an optimal time to do the training, of course, for many of us, depending upon what you're training exactly. But yeah, I don't know the studies about this, but anecdotally, the yogis have been talking about this for 1,500 years or so on, and it kind of checks out. If I'm honest with you right now, my right nostril is much more open than the left nostril, and this could be sort of like, again, it's kind of anecdotally, but again, a lot of the things that we've been finding from the yogic practices have actually been later on proved by science. I mean, if you think about this Nadi Shodan is the alternate nostril breathing. It literally means like skull rinse or cleanse. So it's really referring to the idea of alternate nostril breathing, left, right, and then kind of reversing this V-shape pattern. It is actually rinsing the skull or cleansing the skull, like meaning the breathing infrastructure here. It's opening up the airways. And it's probably the best, in my opinion, it's the best and the go-to breathing pattern or exercise that I use in order before I practice any breathing, because it opens everything up. It does it so well.
I guess these guys who have been sitting a couple of thousand years doing different breathing patterns, like observing what's happening, like they really discovered something we still have science to pick up with. I remember you did teach like a very quick method to open up your nasal cavities, like if you feel a bit constricted. I think it was something about like closing up like this and then like going back, like maybe you can refer to that. I think that was a pretty cool hack.
Yeah, that was an easy one because so it is literally the only downside of this one is that it looks a little bit differently, right? I mean, if you basically just breathe in, you breathe out, and some people will say that you need to nod your head and create extra CO2. You can actually stand up or you can move around, but as so long as you're breathing in, inhaling, then you exhale, you pinch your nose, close your mouth, and then you just generate some sort of CO2. This is the way that it's been taught in sort of Oxygen Advantage. I should probably not, a bit nasally. And you just generate some CO2, and that tends to work for a lot of people to sort of open up the nostrils there. That's an easy one to do, but of course, if you're in the office and you're kind of like, maybe you're not going for that look, so maybe it's easy enough to do the sort of alternate nostril breathing if you like. Depends. If you know your colleagues, maybe it's all good.
So how about like opening up your ears by doing the same stuff? Like, is that like healthy and useful?
Yeah, there's actually some super interesting science that shows the Valsalva Maneuver, which is actually like a freediving technique to sort of like depressurize the ears. So, when you're going down in freediving, going under the water, every 5 meters, I think it's 1 bar pressure that increases. And of course, diving down deeper and deeper and deeper, the sort of lungs compress and a lot of the oxygen's being like almost pressured out of the body in a way. And that's why it comes through the ears. The Valsalva, it's a good reminder, Teemu, because I should dig that study out. It's showing that the heart rate, it has a direct relationship with the heart rate. It's I think it's HRV, maybe it improves HRV and lowers the heart rate by just practicing the Valsalva Maneuver, which is essentially kind of blocking the nose and then pressure. We've all done it before when we've been in a tunnel in the train or something like this. It's that sort of that blocking the nose and pushing out, creating the pressure, and then letting that out through the ears. So yeah, it's quite an interesting one, and it has shown that it has health benefits too. Just got to get my hands on that study for you.
It's interesting. Like some people can't do it actually. Like they have difficulty going diving, for example, because that's like extremely essential technique. But there's like some kind of swallowing technique which can help for those people. So if you can't open up your ears by like depressurizing in that way, you can also use like some kind of like swallowing technique that can also like help in those situations, and you can dive. Now, one thing that comes to mind,
Teemu, just really
please.
quickly, just on that one, that's really a fascinating thing, because when you do dive, I think it's about at the 30-meter mark, the pressure is so intense that there is no more oxygen that can come find its way into the, so for the normal technique, you're sort of like, you're getting air and just sort of like depressurizing the ears. But then after 30 meters, the lungs cannot, because of the pressure, cannot bring oxygen back up. So you have to actually, at 30-meter mark, you have to make sure you have enough air inside of the mouth, inside of the, if you want to say the cranial facial structure, so that you can just every so often do that from the throat. This very quite difficult technique. And we all know that if you go down 30 meters and you're unable to do this technique, the eardrum will burst and so on like that. So it's quite fascinating when we look at the world of freediving. There's like a lot of biohacks that have been done, and they're all sort of centered around the breathing and sort of maximizing human performance around the breath work, and not breathing too, to be honest.
Yeah. There's one technique that I actually heard from the Huberman Lab podcast. It's like basically like imitating what young children do when they are a bit like maybe they have been crying, or like they're upset or something. It's kind of like you breathe in like very quickly through the nose, like, and then you breathe out like slowly, like through the mouth, like through the nose, like several times, just like you're sobbing or something. And that supposedly like 1 or 2 times that it really relaxes your vagus nerve and your nervous system quickly. Are you aware of this technique?
Yeah, I've heard something about this. I think it might be something related to the sort of like the traumatic release, or this kind of, these cycles that we go through. It's also like a sigh. We're using a lot of sighs in the breathing, for example, on the exhale. I would imagine it's, whilst I don't know, I've heard of the technique for sure. And actually in some yogic practices, they've been using this sort of similar sort of like this kind of rhythm or rate. So I'm imagining it's like a release of some description from maybe the nervous system. But in the sigh, I mean, the sigh itself is, we do it in instinctively or intuitively. If somebody gives us a hug, if you get that amazing hug from somebody, if you think about what that means when somebody wraps their arms around you and you sort of get that sort of kind of feeling. This is sort of like a show of safety, and it's sort of a down-regulating action of the body as well. So I would imagine if we were measuring somebody's heart rate at that moment, it's probably decreasing, and they're not stressed at all. So we are using these quite often. You can replace almost any exhale with a sigh this sigh, or a sigh of relief, as it's more commonly known, and it feels great, and it kind of also kind of unites the room as well, because there's a vocal aspect of it.
Gotcha. Is there any other like breathing technique that we haven't yet covered or commented on that you want to bring up?
Well, you want to. One of the interesting ones is yawning. People are sort of using, maybe it's more of an intro, or a sort of like when you have a group of people meeting each other for the first time, it's just having people yawn and sort of like open the mouth, and then that kind of ventures into something called lion's breath, where you're sort of really opening the mouth and you have the tongue sticking out of the mouth, like this as well, looking like one of the Maoris, maybe one of the tribal people from the Maoris, where they're also breathing like this. People are having a lot of fun with these kind of practices, and looking at the, sort of breaking down walls and different barriers, and having fun with sort of like taboo functions. Like natural function of the body is to actually yawn. And there's theories about why we yawn. One of those theories is that the diaphragm, if we're sort of not breathing almost like correctly or sort of engaging the diaphragm, it might give you a cue where you might want to stretch out. So if you think about what the act of yawning means, it means you have to take a huge, or like a quite lengthy or large, often through the mouth, inhale like this. And also, just a side note, there's also studies showing that people that don't yawn, so all the viewers or whoever's watching this or listening to this who didn't yawn just now, you're more likely to be a psychopath, apparently, according to some studies. If you don't, because there's an empathetic, psychopathic biohackers.
There's something interesting about that. I remember reading how it actually affects the brain waves, like when you're like dipping into kind of almost falling asleep, like that reaction is like sending some kind of signal in our nervous system also to like increase alertness. And it's like, even though we associate it with like being sleepy, it's actually a mechanism through which we kind of bring ourselves back in a way. So it's actually like people try to hide it sometimes that they're yawning, but like actually maybe counterproductive to your alertness. If you do that, maybe you should actually do it loudly and do it like, very, very much like a open way.
Loud and proud sort of thing.
Loud and proud and like, hey, I'm just like trying to stay awake here. All good. Yeah. Okay, that's we covered a lot of ground already. So in terms of Wim Hof method, like some people are sometimes concerned that they might damage themselves somehow, or they might lose consciousness or stuff like that. I have definitely like lost myself a few times doing some breathing techniques, like and that you shouldn't do these things alone sometimes, like especially the more harder techniques. Like, what's your comment on that, like safety side of like going some crazy with breathing techniques?
Yeah, look, I mean, just about everything's fine, like there's very few things that can really go too wrong. Of course, if you're, the normal sort of health issues, if somebody has heart issues or unfortunately pregnant women seem to be always like unable to do anything and everything. If you're pregnant and listen to all the things you shouldn't do, you probably will never leave the house of the day. But I do know pregnant women that practice the Wim Hof method, both the breathing technique and actually the cold therapy as well, which is quite interesting. One friend of mine, she'd just given birth, maybe 6-7 weeks ago. She'd been practicing the cold all the way through from summer and has no problems. But then everywhere you look, it's been warned against not to practice both the breathing technique because of the breath holds and the increased sort of pressure on the breath holds, and certainly not the cold exposure. But I think a lot of the time it's mainly the pregnant ladies miss out because of no one wants to take responsibility for them. But the overwhelming majority of people that have Wim Hof method in their practice are indeed practicing this alone, usually at their home. And the things that I would just recommend is that lay down. It's more relaxing. A lot of people want to do the cool, they want to do the Zen looking, half lotus or full lotus, where they've got the legs tucked up like this. That is a supporting posture, and it is one that it's very, very difficult to fall forward. That's the idea of the full lotus posture, where you have the legs crossed in with the feet underneath the sort of thighs there. But then if you must sit, then best to just sort of back up against the wall, because as you mentioned, Teemu, we're really playing with the breath. We're really bringing breathing heavily, breathing deeply. If you really look, we've even got I've even got a graph here where you can kind of see what the Wim Hof method looks like in terms of like an actual graph visualization of this. I mean, if you really think about when are you really breathing like this? I mean, I don't see many people, unless they're on the treadmill in a gym, breathing like this at this sort of rate and with this sort of intensity. And we know how the energy system of the body works. Glucose, proteins, fats require oxygen to, we go through the glycolysis, and that's how energy is produced in the body, by making the ATP in our cells, this molecule that's then readily or usable energy. So if we're laying down, actually not doing any, there's no sporting endeavors to, that we're doing, we're laying down, generating the energy in the body, like what happens to that? Like where does it go? How do we experience that energy? And so that's the beauty of the breathing. If you're laying down, you do get the flashes. You do feel like this amazing. You do get also increased or elevated, what are commonly known as stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. But those same sort of stress hormones have been found to be very, very useful in almost like a hormetic effect, where in small doses and they actually suppress the innate immune response, which is the white blood cell production in the body. And this is one of the key findings of the Wim Hof studies, is that when you practice the breathing technique, it raises there's a complete spike of all the white blood cells in the body, the stress hormones in the body, which suppresses the white blood cells production. And this lasts for up to six to 7 days. I mean, this is quite profound thing in terms of combating stress. Now, there is a point of diminishing returns where if we actually, like I've mentioned a couple of times already, if we keep pushing the boundaries here, and we keep doing round after round after round after round, this is not giving us the same benefits after a while. Like we know that stress hormones produced in the body over extended period of time will kill you actually, or at least give you, cause quite considerable harm to the body. So we just, again, with caution, and as you mentioned as well, certainly not around the water. We don't want to be hyperventilating near the water. This is the thing that they teach us in freediver. I'm a qualified freediver. That's why there's a few references to freediving as well. This is one of the things they teach us. Please don't ever do the hyperventilation, even though we know that a lot of you can hold your breath for a extended period of time, maybe even longer, way longer than usual. But what happens to you is that you delay that CO2 response, so you don't actually get the trigger. So if the longer and further you go with that, the less likely you are to get that CO2 trigger, and then you can pass out. And like we mentioned, if you pass out in the water, not good.
Not smart. Yeah, don't do it. All right, we covered a lot of ground here. So if people want to learn directly from Leigh Ewin these techniques, he's definitely a great teacher. He knows a lot about these things, like expanded definitely to different dimensions and understanding the technology as well. He's a really good guide. I would say he's one of the best definitely to guide a proper reading session. He's very good at it. He has a great voice for it also. And it's powerful stuff. You can experience that at the next Biohackers Retreat, 28 and 30 of April in Tallinn, Estonia. I will be also there. My co-author, Olli Sovijärvi, the doctor of the Biohacker's Handbook, will be also there, and many other people, Siim Land as well. And so that's a great retreat. A few nights in the wilderness. We do the ice bath stuff. We do all the breathing techniques. We have some really amazing guided sessions, as well as information and presentations that dive deep into different aspects of biohacking. So take a look at biohackersretreats.com. You can also find the link, I think, on biohackercenter.com, our store as well. And yeah, we also mentioned the breath belt. You can purchase the breath belt at biohackercenter.com. It's right now it's stocked up and ready to ship globally. It's a great device to make sure you're breathing correctly, and it will apparently put 5 to 10% more weight on your bar. Not guaranteed, but try it out, like what breathing can do. If you are struggling, you have plateaued in your progress, or if you have any kind of postural issues, that's great stuff. One thing that I recommend people to do is to, like, if you take any kind of breathing practice, do it consistently, like do it every day. I've noticed that if you do it just like once a week, couple of times a week, you're not really learning it. You're not really getting the cumulative benefits and effects. compared to if you were doing it every single day. So make it part of your practice. I've noticed like huge improvement in like subjective experience of the day if I do it on a daily basis. I notice definitely if I haven't done it. And it's like with meditation and with many other things. It's like with exercise. If you just exercise once a month, probably not beneficial. Once a week, great. But if you do it regularly enough, like that's when you start to see the benefits of it. And breathing is no different. I guess you would agree with that.
Yeah, 100%.
I guess.
Yeah. Just really, really quickly as well, like as we touched on right at the beginning, the conscious element, and I know you're a big proponent for this as well, Teemu. Adding conscious element to anything of life is sort of where it's at, right? I mean, it gives everything a little bit more meaning. And then I think many of us we get disconnected from the idea, we can control the breathing. We can sort of get out in front of it. We don't have to wait for it to get out of control, or sort of like, what's going on here? My face is red, I'm panting. Or, think about when some people get on the stage and they lose the breath, the heart starts pounding. What's the way to dial it back? That's through the breath. So it's not, adding the conscious element, and then you can start to sort of, you don't even have to set aside. This is the beauty of it. We're breathing all the time. You don't have to set aside 1 hour every day for this. You can do this on the way to work. If you're catching a bus, often like I find myself doing, I go up a certain set of stairs for the last, for half of this, 100 stairs or whatever I have to get up in the train station. I just don't, I do a pause. I do sort of like a little apnea stair climb, which raises the level of CO2, and I use my own breath to sort of down-regulate the rise of CO2. So little things you can do like this along the way. It builds up optimal breathing, and that's what, if on average you're going to do this 25,000 times, everyone said this is a cliche. If you're going to do it 25,000 times in a day, why not hack that? Why not find the best way to do that?
That's so well said. And if you need some guidance, go to leighewin.com, and he has a great breathwork guide as a PDF. You can download it there, as well as you should definitely book your tickets. Yeah, there's your contact info. So you should definitely book your tickets to Biohacker Summit, 3 and 4 of June in Helsinki, Finland. Leigh is going to be guiding several sessions there and also on stage giving a presentation. So that's definitely like one of those practices for longevity and extending your health span that everyone should really dial into. So if you haven't really, fully grasped like how to breathe, this is the opportunity. I mean, you probably lived your life without learning to breathe correctly. Like we kind of like subconsciously and autonomously we learn how to breathe, but we breathe pretty often in a wrong way. And there's ways to correct that, and it will like just reduce your stress, increase your health, well-being, immunity. Like there's so many benefits to breathing, and it's fun. You can generate your own like internal psychedelics if you do some specific techniques. I've definitely experienced that myself also with different breathing techniques. And going on this breathing course in the Art of Living Foundation, the Art of Breathing was one of the first courses I had on breathing. That was really eye-opening. Like I learned how to use breathing in a correct way. And
I mean, third eye opening, or?
It was like eye diagram opening, definitely, that, hey, I can actually use my breathing to regulate my stress response. And it was huge benefit to the stress that I was going through at that time. So I would definitely recommend learning different techniques. And yeah. Well, there's still one question. Maybe we answer this one and then we'll let you go. From Nina Lynn. Why is that when you try breathing deep using my stomach muscles and take deep breaths, I get dizzy and sometimes even start feeling sick? So do you have anything to say about that?
Well, it can be, it's so individual thing. But without knowing too much about this person who's asked this question, the breathing should be easy. You know, it should be of ease. It shouldn't feel labored. It shouldn't feel like you have to try almost. Once we develop good breathing sort of behaviors and or like techniques and mechanisms, or the biomechanics are in place, we know how the technique, we know how to pull the air in, then it becomes easier, then it becomes a behavior, then it becomes sort of a default process of the body. And then actually we don't even have to be conscious about it at some point if that's sort of the default way to breathe. What a lot of people seem to experience is that when they're actually trying really hard to pull, like, you know, I think we could probably even do a quick demo, like, you know, the wave breathing. So it's where we sort of like, we kind of breathe into the belly first. We put one hand on the chest, one hand on the belly. My hand's a little bit out of the picture down here, but we kind of breathe in through the nose, and we kind of inflate the belly first and then the chest. This is a really good exercise to sort of start training or practicing yourself how to pull the air into the belly. And it's quite intuitive. It's like, we call it wave breathing because it's almost like, you know, wave like this. So we inflate the belly, then the chest like this, sort of like this. And this is the correct biomechanics. Try this exercise. Also, one really easy one to do is if you're laying down, if you have like a phone or a device or a book or something, you can kind of place that on the belly, and you can start to try and manage, like on the breath in, you have the book rise, and on the exhale, you let the book or the object fall. This is a really easy way to start like sort of engaging the diaphragm and kind of reclaiming your breath again. Sounds like if they're feeling really nauseous and whilst breathing to the belly, that sounds like there could be something else there as well, without trying to do any sort of pseudo doctor stuff here. I just look at the breathing patterns and the habits. Is it possible that you're breathing through the nose through the day by default, or, you know, like, is it possible that you're doing this, or is it really difficult if you're a mouth breather and you're trying to sort of reset your breathing, and you're trying to breathe into the belly? Then I would go to some of those things we mentioned earlier in this show, and talking about taping the mouth, potentially using the nasal dilators that Teemu and I had shown as well, and creating good breathing behaviors primarily around the sleeping. Because if you're sleeping 6 to 8 to 9 hours of a nighttime, and you're able to sort of lay there unconscious in a way, and just training, you're developing those behavioral mechanisms that are going to serve you well to be able to breathe into the belly later on anyway.
That's pretty good like advice. And if you're looking for a book to put on your belly, like, get the Biohacker's Handbook. It's definitely going to make it more labor.
That's gonna work the diaphragm for sure, that book.
Definitely a good work at the same time. And if you don't get breathless and die under the book, like, you should definitely pre-order our next book as well. It's called The Resilient Being, and the Resilient Being book is at resilient-being.com. It's our sequel for the Biohacker's Handbook, and it goes very deep into nervous system and different breathing techniques as well. So that's much recommended for anyone who's interested to learn more about these topics. Yeah, there we go. So the Resilient Being book. So if you don't have this yet on a pre-order list, please do, and you get a lot of benefits, including a lot of extra material, and you get access to a community of people who are interested in different practices for becoming resilient and hard to kill, and just like live long and prosper. So with that, thank you very much, Leigh, for coming to the show. So LeighEwin.com, Leigh Ewin at Instagram as well. Like, he has some really nice live webinars as well occasionally, so you should definitely like subscribe on his website. And sometimes he does these guided breathwork sessions online, and it's a really amazing way to do that from your home in his guidance. And if you want to meet us, like, come to Biohacker's Retreat end of April, and then there is of course the June conference in Helsinki, Finland. With that, man, looking forward to meeting you soon as well. Yes. And keep on breathing.
Keep on breathing.
Keep on breathing.
Breathe well or die trying, or something like that.
And one thing I learned from you is, like, if there's like one practice, it's like consciously paying attention to breathing through the nose. Like, if you do that every day, all the time, like you learn to breathe through the nose, and it becomes second nature, as you explained. Like once you do these things, they kind of become autonomic and completely autonomous. And cool stuff, man. Thank you very much for all of this.
Pleasure.
Cheers, man. See you soon.
See you, mate.